$242 million bought Denver a losing record and a financial disaster. The Broncos didn't just trade for Russell Wilson. They shipped 3 starters and 5 draft picks to Seattle, then handed him a guaranteed extension before he ever played a regular season snap. By March 2024, Denver had no way out. Cutting Wilson meant swallowing $85 million in dead money, more than double the previous NFL record. This is how one contract broke an entire franchise, and how a rookie quarterback finally set them free. The Broncos hadn't made the playoffs since 2015. By March 2022, the franchise was desperate for a quarterback who could snap that ugly streak. GM George Payton saw his chance once Seattle grew restless. The Seahawks wanted a full reset, and Wilson privately wanted a bigger national stage to build his brand. Payton moved fast. Denver shipped Drew Lock, Shelby Harris, and Noah Fant to Seattle. They also sent 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and swapped a 5th-round selection in a move that completely emptied their draft reserves for the next 2 seasons. The trade dominated headlines across the league. Wilson was a Super Bowl winner, a 9-time Pro Bowler, and one of the most bankable stars in football. The Walton Penner Group was still closing its four-ton $65 billion purchase. They hadn't even taken control yet, and already the franchise had bet its future on one player. Fans were fired up. Analysts called it the biggest move of the offseason. The Broncos finally had their guy, but there was a problem. The trade had stripped Denver of its best currency for building a roster, and the Walton Penner Group was about to inherit a bet they never placed. That same strategy had worked for the Rams with Matthew Stafford, but Stafford had 1 year left on his deal when Los Angeles traded for him. Wilson still had 2 years. Denver could have played out those seasons, seen how he fit, then decided. They chose the opposite path. Those 2 first-round picks were gold. In the NFL, first-round picks are the cheapest way to add elite young talent on controlled contracts. Losing 2 of them, plus 2 second-rounders, meant Denver was stripping itself of the currency-smart teams used to build long-term contenders. The Seahawks would later use Denver's 2022 first-round pick on offensive tackle Charles Cross. They would use the 2023 first on cornerback Devin Witherspoon, who became an All-Pro. Denver gave away foundational players before the new owners had even hung their nameplates. But the trade was only the opening move. The real damage came 5 months later, and it would dwarf everything Denver had already given up. 5 months later, the Broncos made a second bet that dwarfed the first. In September 2022, before Wilson had thrown a single regular season pass in a Denver uniform, the team signed him to a 5-year extension worth roughly $245 million. $165 million of that was fully guaranteed. The logic from Denver's side was clear. Quarterback contracts were exploding. If they waited, Wilson's price would only climb. Locking him up early looked like smart business. It also sent a message to the locker room in the league that the Broncos were committed. They were not renting Wilson, they were building around him. But the structure of the deal carried a hidden trigger. Wilson's 2025 salary, worth $37 million, would become fully guaranteed in March 2024 if he was still on the roster. That meant Denver had less than 2 seasons to decide whether Wilson was worth the investment. If they kept him through March 2024, they were stuck with him through 2025. And because the signing bonus had already been paid, cutting him would accelerate all that prorated money onto the salary cap at once. For fans unfamiliar with cap mechanics, here's the simple version. When a team pays a signing bonus, they spread that hit across multiple seasons for accounting. But if they cut the player, the remaining spread hits immediately. It's like prepaying rent for 5 years, then moving out after 2. The landlord still wants the remaining 3 years. In the NFL, that remaining balance is called dead money, and Denver was about to set the all-time record. The extension wasn't a minor footnote. It transformed a manageable trade risk into an existential one. Without the extension, Denver could have played the 2022 season on Wilson's existing deal, evaluated the fit, and walked away with minimal damage if things went south. The extension removed that escape hatch. It tied the franchise to Wilson's performance for at least 3 more years and possibly 5. Payton and the Walton Penner Group were betting that a 33-year-old quarterback who had spent his entire career in Seattle's system would instantly thrive in a new city with a new coach and a new playbook. They bet $242 million on chemistry. Most teams preferred to structure guarantees in ways that gave them exit ramps. Denver's deal with Wilson had no such ramp. It was a cliff, and the Broncos were about to find out exactly how fast they were falling. The 2022 season opened with hype and hope. Wilson's first game as a Bronco was against his old team in Seattle. He lost. The Broncos scored 16 points. Things didn't improve from there. The offense under head coach Nathaniel Hackett was disjointed, slow, and predictable. Denver finished the season averaging 16.9 points per game. That was dead last in the NFL. A franchise that had built its identity on defense and running games in the 1990s had somehow built an offense that couldn't score. Wilson's individual numbers told the same story. He threw 16 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. His touchdown percentage was the lowest of his entire career. Throws that he used to drop perfectly into tight windows were sailing high or falling short. The chemistry that the front office assumed would exist simply didn't. The offense was worse than bad. It was historically awful for a team with this much talent on paper. The Broncos had receivers like Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, plus a defense that kept games close, but the offense couldn't stay on the field. Third down became a reliable failure. Red zone trips turned into field goal attempts or turnovers. Hackett's play calling was conservative to the point of paralysis. He looked overwhelmed on the sideline, and the players looked confused on the field. Wilson's struggles ran deeper than scheme. He missed reads he used to see instantly in Seattle. He held the ball too long. His scrambles became sacks. The Broncos paid for a quarterback who could extend plays and create magic. They got a quarterback who looked like he was learning a new language without a translator. Here is a stat that captures the absurdity. In Wilson's final season with Seattle, the Seahawks scored 23 points per game. In his first season with Denver, the Broncos scored 16.9. The Broncos had traded 3 starters and 5 draft picks to upgrade their offense, then made it worse. By December, the stadium was booing. Fans who had bought jerseys and tickets based on the excitement of March were watching a team that had no identity and no direction. The 5-12 record was worse than embarrassing. It was expensive. Denver had already paid Wilson a huge signing bonus and committed future cap space. Because of the extension, they couldn't simply cut ties after one bad year. Most teams evaluate a new quarterback over 2 or 3 seasons before offering a massive extension. Denver did it in 5 months. The 2022 season was the evidence the front office had ignored. Christmas night against the Rams became the symbolic end. Wilson dropped back on a drive that could have saved the game and threw into coverage. The ball was intercepted. The season was effectively over. Hackett was fired 15 games into his first season. The Walton Penner Group, barely months into ownership, was already cleaning up a mess they didn't make. The Broncos finished 5-12. The Wilson era was off to a catastrophic start. January 2023 brought a new twist. The Broncos hired Sean Payton, one of the most accomplished offensive minds in NFL history. But acquiring him wasn't free. Denver traded a 2023 first-round pick and a 2024 second-round pick to the Saints for Payton's coaching rights. That was more draft capital gone. Denver was now down 2 first-round picks and multiple second-rounders, all in service of fixing the Wilson problem. Payton's reputation was built on precision, discipline, and control. Wilson's reputation was built on improvisation, deep balls, and freelancing. 2 alphas, 1 offense. From the start, the fit looked forced. Payton publicly criticized the previous regime in his first press conference. Wilson was used to being the face of the franchise. In New Orleans, Payton had always been the face. The power dynamics were never going to be comfortable. The 2023 season produced an 8-9 record. There was some improvement. The offense looked slightly more organized, but Wilson still held the ball too long. He still missed the quick rhythm throws that Payton's system demanded. In December, with 2 games remaining, Payton made a decision that shocked the locker room. He benched Wilson for Jarrett Stidham. Payton claimed the move was strictly about trying to win an 8th game, but reports from inside the building told a different story. Wilson's 2025 salary guarantee was approaching in March 2024. If Wilson suffered a serious injury in those final 2 games, the guarantee could have triggered automatically. By benching him, Payton protected the franchise from a financial trap that would have made Wilson completely unmovable. Wilson called the benching disappointing and surprising. The relationship was fractured. The benching was a financial maneuver disguised as strategy. Payton knew that if Wilson got hurt, the Broncos would be locked into $37 million for 2025 with no ability to escape. By sitting Wilson, Payton bought the front office time to find an exit, but the exit was already narrowing. Behind the scenes, the Broncos had approached Wilson about restructuring his deal. They wanted him to push back or reduce the 2025 guarantee. Wilson refused. He had signed in good faith and expected the team to honor it. Payton benched a healthy quarterback with 2 games left in a season where the team wasn't mathematically eliminated from playoff contention. The message was unmistakable. Denver wanted out, and Wilson wasn't going to make it easy. The 8-9 record was misleading. It looked like progress from the 5-12 disaster of 2022, but the offense was still not working. Wilson had started 15 games, and the team had gone 7-8 in those starts. The numbers were not much better than the previous year. What changed was the power structure. Payton had taken control of the team, and Wilson was no longer the centerpiece. He was a contract problem wearing a helmet. By January 2024, everyone inside the organization knew what was coming. The only question was how painful the divorce would be, and the answer was sitting in a spreadsheet that would soon make NFL history. On March 4, 2024, the Broncos made it official. Russell Wilson would be released when the new league year began 9 days later. The dead money hit was $85 million. That was the largest dead cap charge in NFL history. The previous record was Matt Ryan's $40.5 million with the Falcons. Denver nearly doubled it. To avoid an $85 million gut punch in a single season, Denver used a post-June 1 designation. This allowed them to split the pain across 2 years. $35.4 million hit the 2024 salary cap. $49.6 million would hit in 2025. Even with the split, $35.4 million in one season was more than many teams paid their entire starting quarterback. Denver was paying Wilson to play for someone else. The reason the number was so enormous traces back to the extension. Wilson had already received a massive signing bonus. That bonus was spread across future years for salary cap accounting. When the Broncos cut him, all the remaining spread had to be recognized immediately. Denver had already paid the cash. Now the accounting bill came due. Wilson didn't wait long to find work. He signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers for roughly the league minimum, about $1.2 million per year. The Broncos were still paying the bulk of his guaranteed money. Pittsburgh got a former Super Bowl quarterback for pocket change, because Denver was subsidizing the contract. Meanwhile, the Seahawks were using the picks Denver gave them to build a playoff roster. Devin Witherspoon, drafted with Denver's 2023 first-rounder, became an All-Pro. The trade that was supposed to save Denver was now actively helping Seattle win. The $85 million figure deserves context. In 2024, the NFL salary cap was roughly $255 million per team. Denver was dedicating nearly 14% of its entire spending limit to a quarterback who was no longer on the roster. Denver had $35.4 million locked away. They couldn't spend it on a pass rusher, an offensive lineman, or even a backup without pinching pennies. The post-June 1 designation let Denver split the dead money across 2 seasons instead of 1. It helped in the short term, but it also extended the misery. Instead of 1 catastrophic season, Denver got 2 consecutive seasons where a huge chunk of their budget was dead. In 2025, the Broncos still carried $33.5 million in dead money from Wilson. That meant 2 full years of roster construction were handicapped by a decision made in September 2022. By December 2023, Football Insiders knew the benching was a prelude to a release. By January 2024, cap analysts were already running the dead money projections. The Broncos weren't blindsided, they were cornered, and the only way out was to swallow a record-breaking number and start over. But starting over would require something Denver had not had in years: a cheap quarterback and a clean sheet of paper. The 2024 season brought a new strategy and a new quarterback. Denver drafted Bo Nix out of Oregon. Because he was a rookie, his salary cap hit was tiny, under $3 million per year for the first few seasons. This is the rookie quarterback contract window, and it's the closest thing to a cheat code in modern NFL roster building. When your quarterback costs almost nothing, you can afford premium players at every other position. Payton and Payton were still in their jobs. The relationship that failed with Wilson was now working with Nix. The Broncos made the playoffs in 2024 for the first time since 2015. They did it while carrying $35 for $1 million of Wilson dead money on their books. Denver made the playoffs while paying more dead money than most teams pay their starting quarterback. That recovery is proof that smart drafting and coaching can overcome even the most expensive mistakes, but the recovery didn't erase the damage. Denver had lost 2 years of prime roster building flexibility. They had wasted draft capital on Wilson and Payton that could have been used to surround a rookie quarterback with elite talent from day one. That they recovered speaks to Payton's coaching and Payton's drafting. That they had to recover shows how one contract can paralyze an organization. The lesson is that guaranteed quarterback contracts signed before evidence are dangerous. Denver extended Wilson in September 2022 because they were afraid of the market. They were afraid that if they waited, Wilson would cost more or leave. Fear makes teams lock in commitments before they know what they're buying. The Broncos bought a reputation. They got a mismatch. The Broncos didn't break because they traded for Russell Wilson. They broke because they extended him before they knew he fit, then couldn't escape the guarantees. A $242 million bet made in 5 months took 2 years and $85 million to unwind. If you want to see how another franchise turned a rookie quarterback contract into a Super Bowl window, watch this next. Subscribe for more financial autopsies from the world of sports business.